Okay. Uh, Victims of racism are serious. Are serious about victims of racism who are serious about eliminating racism, white supremacy, and or who are serious about producing justice cannot afford to engage in any activities other than the aforementioned. The voluntary and constructive use of time and or energy by substantial numbers of the victims of racism would have a very damaging effect on the continued practice of racism and white supremacy. Racism could continue to exist for a while, but only with great difficulty. A great improvement in the production of justice would be immediately evident. And at the same time, each victim of racism would quickly become a stronger and greatly improved person. Victims of racism would no longer, with relative ease, be sidetracked into or burdened with activities that are at best useless rituals and or destructive fads. By using time and energy in accordance with the aforementioned suggestions, victims of racism would eliminate doing those non-constructive and mostly non-satisfying things that usually are the product of indoctrination and or long-standing habit. Their overall function as constructively progressive persons would be greatly simplified. Thought, speech, and action would be much healthier and characterized by less confusion, frustration, and clutter. The maintenance and refinement of racism depends greatly on the ability of the racist, white supremacists, to keep their victims constantly engaged in a variety of activities that are wasteful of time and energy and or that are in other ways directly supportive of the continuation of racism. Therefore, each victim of racism should use all of his or her time and energy in a manner that results in the least amount of waste and frustration, while at the same time greatly improving his or her ability to counteract racism, white supremacy in all areas of activity, including economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, war, counterwar. Victims should at all times be engaged in one or more of the aforementioned four interrelated uses of time and energy as long as racism, white supremacy exists. No victim of racism should at any time be engaged in any other use of time and energy. Important. At no time should any person seek the company of, make deliberate contact with, or voluntarily remain in the presence of other persons except for the purpose of speaking and or acting in support of the suggested 4 point economic format. If you do not have constructive employment, and if you are without the things that you must have for constructive self support, food, garments, shelter, etc., do one or more of the following, preferably in the following sequence. 1. Go wherever necessary to seek constructive temporary shelter, housing, etc., from someone whom you believe can afford to provide you with constructive temporary shelter. A hut, a room, a tent, a shed, a cabin, a shack, etc. 2. Go wherever necessary to seek constructive employment, job, etc. That will help you to receive constructive support, food, garments, shelter, transportation, medicine, constructive information, etc. 3. Seek to make compensatory emergency investment requests so-called begging or pleading from white people who you have reason to believe can best afford to help you receive the most constructive support. This support should include information and other assistance that will help you to constructively support yourself. Notes: under no circumstance is it correct to rob or steal from anyone at any time for any so called reason. It is correct to ask for what is needed. If what is needed cannot be produced by the person asking, if what is needed cannot be produced by the person asking. During the existence of white supremacy racism, and according to compensatory counter racist logic, whatever a non white person does in any area of activity is directly or indirectly a reaction to white supremacy racism, usually in the form of a cry for help. During the existence of white supremacy, and according to compensatory counter racist logic, if a non white person asks a white person for money in order to do something of constructive value, that non white person is not so called begging. He or she is a business person making a compensatory investment request. This compensatory investment request should be regarded as a normal requirement in order to invest in the process of replacing the system of white supremacy racism with the system of justice, balance between people. Question: what is the best and correct thing to say about people who beg? Answer: people are born begging. And if they exist long enough, they will spend their last days begging. Question: what is the best and correct thing that a person should be willing to beg for? Answer: justice, balance between people, which means to guarantee that no person is mistreated and to guarantee that the person who needs the most help gets the most constructive help at all times, in all places, in all areas of activity. Choose to beg for those things produced by the work of others rather than to rob or steal. Never choose to rob or steal. Instead, go to a white person who you have reason to believe can be of some help and ask for the constructive help that is needed. Repeatedly ask for such help from white people and avoid asking for such help from non-white people. Explanation: according to compensatory logic, it is always so-called embarrassing and incorrect to rob and steal. It is always so-called embarrassing and incorrect to rob and steal. According to compensatory logic, it is neither embarrassing nor incorrect to beg for constructive help. Compensatory investment request. When your sincere efforts at trying to do constructive work for yourself or for others has ended in failure. As long as white supremacy racism exists, everything that non-white people get that is of constructive material value or that is of greatly destructive material value comes directly or indirectly from white people. Therefore, it is compensatory counter-racist logic for non-white people to ask white people for what is needed. And when they do not receive it, they must compensate by interacting with the powers of the known and unknown, with the powers of the known and unknown, the Creator, God, Allah, all power, etc., and or by interacting with white people according to selections from a compensatory counter-racist code. Non-white people who choose to rob or steal from any people, white or non-white, should expect no mercy from either white people or non-white people. It is correct for people who have been robbed the most and stolen from the most, non-white people, to be willing to take the first step toward putting an end to all robbing and stealing. Any people, white or non-white, who are not in favor of supporting the aforementioned corrective suggestions should expect the interactions between the people of the known universe to continue to be what they should not be. Always be mentally and physically prepared to function constructively and to become stronger by doing more with less material support. Examples: eat less food and drink more water. 2. Acquire, wear, and maintain only those garments that are absolutely necessary. 3. Maintain adequate and basic shelter facilities with maximum logical use of every little space. 4. Be prepared to move yourself and all your possessions many times and make sure that your most important possessions can be moved frequently from place to place with little difficulty. 5. Avoid acquiring anything that is not necessary for supporting constructive thought, speech, and action. According to, when talking about health, the health of a person, talk about correct health and correct economics as being one and the same. According to compensatory counter-racist logic, economics pertains to the manner in which all time and energy is used. Health is basically the combination of use of time and energy in all areas of activity. Therefore, correct health and correct economics is the way that time and energy is used in regards to all persons, all creatures, and all things in their interaction with one another within the known and unknown universe. The correct use of time and energy equals correct health. When talking about the mental health of people, say that the best way to produce correct thinking in the minds of people during the existence of white supremacy racism is to explain to all of the non-white people of the known universe exactly what white supremacy is and how it works in all areas of activity, including economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, counter-war. It is important that every person in the known universe knows and understands that white supremacy racism is a world system of domination and mistreatment, deliberately designed to dominate and mistreat people classified as non-white at all times, in all places, and in all areas of activity. Eat and drink correctly and only as necessary. What you put in to your mind and body will have the effect of either being constructive or non-constructive. Either that you eat, everything that you eat, drink, breathe, inject, or observe into your body should always make you think, speak, and act more constructively. Many of the things that people, both white and non-white, are exposed to, and many of the things that they eat, drink, breathe, inject, and absorb do great harm. It is correct for all people to do all that they can to learn about everything that they eat, drink, breathe, inject, or absorb. All people should learn the difference between true food and false food. To do so requires much study, but such study should be done without dangerous experimentation. Much care should be taken to avoid producing mistaken or non constructive conclusions. Do the best you can to eat and sleep correctly, and only as necessary. And while doing so, think about the following. 1. All food and drink should be for the purpose of helping the body and mind do constructive things. 2. Nothing should be put into the body of any creature that does not help that creature to think and act constructively, correctly. 3. It is not always easy to discover what is really food and what food is best for a person. 4. It is not always easy to know the correct amount of food that should be eaten, nor the correct conditions for eating that food in that amount. It is, however, correct for each person to make a serious attempt to get as much information as he or she can about the correct foods to eat, when to eat them, and in what amount. Because something can be eaten probably with pleasure does not necessarily mean that it should be eaten. Many things that can be eaten do great harm to the mind and body. 5. Many things that people eat or drink do little other than poison the mind and body. In addition, those foods or drinks that may be correct for the body or mind may not be treated or stored correctly, causing an incorrect result when put into a person's body. Sleeping like eating. 6. Sleeping and eating like eating and drinking should also be done correctly and only as necessary. It is not always easy to know exactly how to sleep or how much sleep is necessary. If a person does not have the will or the ability to think, speak, and or act constructively, it may be because he or she sleeps too much or not enough. It is correct for a person to use the required time and energy necessary to constructively take care of his or her body, including the brain. To do so is more important than taking care of his or her garments or housing. Control your temper. Okay. Temper serves a purpose, but it should be controlled. Understand what is happening and why. Listen to what is being said and why. React to every situation by using constructive logic. Do not allow yourself to be provoked into doing or saying anything that you are likely to regret doing or saying. Do not hit, curse, name call any person who seems to be trying to provoke and or trick you into doing or saying something that you will regret. Be prepared and be alert for temper-provoking traps. Do your best to be calm and methodical in doing what is most constructive in stressful situations. Practice making plans on how to speak and or act in stress-provoking situations. Codify everything to do and not codify everything to do and not do in hostile situations. Suggestions. Yes, sir. Stop. All right. All right. Question 16. How are demographics changing in majority black urban cities. In the 21st century, the majority white population, in the midst of recapturing urban cities through a combination of gentrification, privatization, and immigration initiatives used in urban cities to displace blacks, um, initiatives used to replace blacks, displace blacks, um, to push them out and to push those who remain into minority status with no problem. Okay, in the majority white population is in the midst of recapturing urban cities through a combination of gentrification, privatization and immigration, initiatives used in urban cities to displace blacks, to push them out, and to push those who remain into minority status with no power. Major political and economic efforts across the nation are systematically redeveloping those cities into comfortable havens for affluent whites and ethnic immigrants who are taking over the assets of urban cities. Since the early 1980s, city planners took the lead from social conservatives and initiated specific projects to attract whites under the guise of attracting new money to major urban centers, which had become majority black during the 1960s and 1970s civil rights movement. The key strategies of gentrification and privatization offer returning whites incentives such as cheap residential and commercial property and ownership and control of public owned assets, bridges, museums, school buildings, airports, bridges, golf courses, parks, waterfront property, and anything that could be used to generate capital. The black elected officials, business leaders, ministers, civil rights leaders, and celebrities often cooperate with and encourage these asset transfers from black control to white control. From Washington, D.C. to Chicago, and in black dominated cities across the nation, it is easily observed that social and economic conditions have caused life to regress to a jungle like existence. Many hold the disquieting belief that black Americans squandered their chances to build, maintain, and manage urban cities. But there is more to the story than the contemporary snapshot. After riots, racial disturbances, and as the after riots, racial disturbances, and as the integration movement took hold about 50 years ago, whites began to flee urban areas to cede control. They moved their families to the suburbs and took with them everything they owned. Blacks began to gain limited control over those cities, but white flight had drained the essential resources. By the time blacks took control, the cities were weakened and poor. Although abandoned by whites, urban cities are situated in desirable locations with many natural assets such as rivers, ports, and other amenities, which led to their selection as major population centers in the first place. Okay, whites eventually wanted to regain control, and that process is in full swing. The first generation of black urban politicians that had control of cities came in the mid 1960s, and for the most part were determined pro black personalities. But they did not have the resources to manage and maintain the cities. The following generation of black elected officials tended to have colorblind attitudes and began to work along with whites who wanted to regain the cities that they had given up. The most successful strategy to recapture control of the cities was to ignore black city dwellers and to elect black or white officials with colorblind attitudes about race, invoking concepts such as minority, diversity, colorblind, and people of color makes any form of blackness invisible. Blacks do not seem to notice that when politicians use the colorblind strategy, blacks are not even mentioned. They are ignored and, for all practical purposes, disappear, except for photo ops. When blacks disappear, then politicians and development can literally be colorblind. The sleight hand, the sleight of hand trick is performed in full view of blacks who are watching but do not seem to notice that they no longer exist. When black elected officials inherited control of the urban cities amid white flight to the suburbs, the urban cities began to deteriorate because of scorched earth policies. Fleeing whites took everything they owned and controlled out of cities. Black mayors but inherited the cities, but not the financial resources. All but the first generation of black mayors also lacked the vision to use the opportunity to build those cities into strong black competitive economies. In addition to whites leaving the city, they related social phenomena the related social phenomena began to weave into the pattern. Related social phenomena began to weave. The Highway Transportation Act of 1956 routed and built expressways right through black business districts and black communities, destroying them. A few years later, urban renewal, more properly called black removal, finished off the black businesses and the black middle class communities in the cities. As whites moved, blacks became the majority population and elected officials and city council. Okay, as whites moved, blacks became the majority population and elected black mayors and city councils. Black mayors did not destroy the urban centers. Did not destroy the urban centers. The white response to integration did the trick. The immigration onslaught stared at about the same time, or started. Ooh-wee. The immigration onslaught started, okay, at about the same time. After the 1965 Immigration Act, immigrants from Mexico, South America, Asia, and the Pacific Islands flooded into the cities and further displaced blacks in what had been their communities. The black middle class had many pressures. With their businesses and homes demolished, they made the choice to abandon their own cities, their own people, the land they controlled in the city, and the potential for building competitive black businesses, industries, and functional communities capable of practicing capitalism. They followed the white middle class into the suburbs that surrounded the urban areas or urban cities. The exodus of the black middle class left the black masses leaderless, divided, and incapable of competing with an endless influx of ethnic immigrants. These social forces will make blacks a minority class in what were once majority black urban centers. It is unlikely that a second chance for control will ever happen again. As whites returned to as the whites return to revitalize urban areas, they will flush blacks out and force them to the aging suburbs, which will become the new black ghettos. The combined effects of gentrification and privatization in urban centers will fix blacks in the ranking order at nearly the same level they were 100 years earlier. Whites and other ethnics who receive approximately 98% of black Americans' annual disposable income take comfort in the non-competitiveness of black Americans and are reassured that racism and the nation's social contract is working as designed. Ooh-wee! Pitiful. Pitiful, pitiful, pitiful.